I know it's weird. It's weird saying like that's the hottest 3-year-old I've ever seen. Because
Well, you said it.
well, I don't think I've ever said that before and meant it.
I meant it.
Amazing.
Welcome to the Macross Delta Recap Show. Episode 22. This is EXO, along with the magical girl that bitch slaps her co-hosts into starting the show.
Oh my god.
Celia Rose. How are you, Celia?
Oh, I'm good. I'm dying in model kit stickers.
And our Becca expert that loves icy crusties on his Cheerios, Chad. Hey, Chad. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
How's the Cheerios?
Delicious.
Oh my god.
Episode 22, Extreme Bravery. The episode opens with Roy exiting the Shrine of Time, and the protoculture relics are actually still in place. So I don't know if they were a hallucination or what, but we didn't find out anything so far. The rest of the knights are outside in the veranda again, talking about Heinz and how he fell while he was singing when they were doing the experiments over Al Shahal, and they were worried about the enemy finds out and they'll know that they're weak. The last scene on that part, we've Cosm and Norman talking about apples in the orchard.
Norman the red shirt is actually an apple farmer, which I shouldn't be surprised that Herman's family would be like a farming family, but I'm also kind of like, everybody's an apple farmer.
Yeah. I mean, all those birds, and not one of them is in the poultry business, right?
Look, I don't know if I'd want to eat one of those. Like, if I had to be the person to like catch that thing so I could butcher it, a lot of those birds are scary. I don't know if I'd want that job.
You know, tastes like chicken. That's what they say. We see Keith and Heinz, and they're talking about Royd. He's kind of like telling Heinz, there's new developments, and Heinz is like, Royd is saying that it shouldn't affect anything, and he trusts Royd. And then we see kind of a flashback with Keith with his dad, Queen Gramia. That's when we see all the birds up above. That was the day that Heinz was born, and that was also the last day that he was allowed to call King Gramia his father.
So that scene, I think, was supposed to be kind of emotional because it's revealing, at least in my opinion, the last day that Keith was actually considered a legitimate son of the king. And from what I remember in the first chapter, I think it's the first or second chapter of the Aerial Knights manga, is that he was disowned, declared illegitimate when he was pretty old. I think he was like, what, 10 or 11, something like that? Typically, if you have that happen where you have royalty and you have an illegitimate child, typically it's when they're still pretty young that you're like, well, I will claim them as my own or I will not. So I'm not sure what made Gramia decide to disown Keith at that point, where he's like, you're not my son anymore. It just seems kind of weird, because if Keith wasn't the wind singer, why would Gramia still like claim him as his son until Heinz was born, already knowing full well that Keith cannot be a wind singer?
You still have to have like a son to take over the kingdom, whether or not he's the wind singer or not, right?
I suppose. I just think it's kind of weird, but it's also kind of sad. So if you think about it, that's harder to deal with as a 10, 11-year-old kid than it is when you're, just a baby. And then you grow up knowing that already. So I can only imagine what kind of shift Keith had to go through in order to deal with that.
I am not impressed at all with any of the relationship development or like interpersonal relationships between Keith and any of the other characters. He just seems to be like a total like non-entity when it comes to anything. Like he's got like his, idea of what should be going on, and he's like a forceful presence, of course, but like as far as any of these relationships go, everything's just falling flat. And I really don't like the implication of this particular scene, because it seems to me that given everything that's going on, Keith is trying to make some sort of move toward Heinz. Like he's trying to get Heinz to either think for himself, or he's trying to manipulate Heinz for his own good, away from what he thinks is a problem, i.e. Royd. That's what this whole scene felt like he was trying to do. But there's like almost no pre-existing relationship. In fact, the flashback to what was going on between Heinz, Keith, and Royd when they were younger just reinforces the fact that Heinz has zero relationship with Keith, and Keith has like no emotional investment in Heinz at all. It seems like even now, even if he is like outraged at Heinz' condition and whatnot. It's like he's not really doing anything about it, like on a personal level. Here, he just seems to be like making a political play, and I think that the writers are sort of shorthanding it too by letting letting Keith just say something as simple as make sure and follow the true wind, and that will show you the way kind of thing. It's just like some sort of like Yoda-esque reminder, like this 5-second blurb of dialogue that's supposed to be like so profound that it's going to change the entire way that Heinz looks at Royd, which I think is preposterous, just given like the relationship that Royd has had with Heinz versus that of Keith. It's almost like, Keith is like forgiven for not like having any investment whatsoever in Heinz, not paying him any attention or giving him the time of day. And now he gets to come along and like just utter some ridiculous like Windermerean platitude, and all of a sudden Heinz is supposed to like reevaluate his entire life.
And also, we're supposed to forget the fact that they flipped position. Remember, they even had like a sword fight about the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Except Royd was the one on Heinz's side.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I don't like it. Don't like it. I don't like it. I will say that it looks like there is something being set up, at least among the aerial knights, that there's going to be like a possible shift, because Bogue and I think it was maybe it was the twins or something like that he was talking to or talking about or with. I know for sure it was Bogue who was talking about the fact that without the Windsinger, they can't control the Brasinger cluster, right? Yeah. So I think that the fact that it's Bogue talking like this and he's realizing what's going on and whatnot, at at least on the level of the Windsinger, I think that's maybe setting up an idea that maybe the younger aerial knights might have a way to be swayed away from Royd should things go sour. But at least it shows that some of the young aerial knights are kind of aware of like what everything hinges on in this war to a certain extent. They know that they're very dependent upon the Windsinger for what they've accomplished so far and what they can maintain in the future. So it's kind of more critical than ever that everybody concentrates on what's happening to Heinz and what he's going to do next.
Too many secrets in this show.
So many secrets.
And not even it's annoying because there's no payoff for them, like immediate payoff. I know I'm impatient, but Ared's our secret keeper for Chaos Squadron, and now Royd is kind of becoming that party where he's like, well, I know everything, and I'm just gonna let the audience know a little bit at a time of what's going on. And so now all the secrets that are like, oh, well, don't tell anybody, or I had to keep this from you, it's starting to get a little annoying by this point. Maybe that's just me.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
Oh, God. Speaking of Ared.
Your favorite
Don't get me started. Yeah, so when we switch over to the Delta part of this episode, our triangle are talking about how they got reinstated to, Freya got reinstated to Walkure, and Hayate gets reinstated into the Delta. They're talking to Mirage and how did you convince Ared to do that? And I'm like, you don't have to convince Ared of anything. You just have to bring it up and he'll say yes. You know what I mean? He's just like, Hayate comes and he's like, I want you part of my group. All right, I'll fly for you, but I'm gonna fly my way. And it's like, sure, that's fine. And I'm not gonna wear a helmet. Okay, no helmet, sounds good. And Messer's like, I have the VAR. That's can I still fly? Yeah, of course you can. Why even ask? Issues after issues, and he's just like, sure. You guys want to sing for Walkure again? Fine. If Mirage asked for the transfer to sing for Walkure, he would say yes right away. He wouldn't even blink. He'll just gulp a jellyfish and be like, sure, just fill this out. That's
Your
it.
salt for Ared is so strong right now.
Oh man, you are so salty on this character. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Because it's all just the fact that Ared is so plot driven as a character. He's almost flat as a character. And his motives are just so driven by plot rather than actual character at all.
Well, and even with Hayate, I could see him, being like, yeah, sure, for Hayate, because he knows that he's Right Immelman's son. So he's kind of almost giving him special treatment. But yeah, that's everything else though. I'm just like, Ared, no. Arid, no, like his judgment on things sometimes, because we don't have enough character development for him, is very questionable.
Yeah.
Beside the first episode and that one scene last week, have you seen Arid fight since? I mean, there's a scene this episode where he's like miles away from the action, and then Hayate, Freya, and Mirage kind of like solve their issue, and he's like, "Ah, I see they worked it out," and he's like so far away, and he's like, "Dude, aren't you gonna join the fight? You're just like looking and observing and taking selfies
Yeah.
and whatever."
Taking selfies. What if that's
I think
actually what he's
he's
doing?
yeah, it's
Like he's
actually
because like Twitter is really popular in Japan. What if he's like tweeting like out to about to invade Windermere now? Selfie, emoticon. Hee 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 hee. Yeah, I don't know.
Two Drakens down, LOL. you know.
at Voldor, FOMO.
Oh god, I love this headcanon of him being like a social media addict. Can we please keep it? Like I really like this. There's nothing really else that he has besides Secret Keeper. So I like this headcanon that he's just addicted to social media and that's why he's not actually participating in the fights. That just seems like a great answer.
Again, with the particular like of him not participating in combat, I think that's another tyranny of the writing of the show, is that we have in his particular vicinity, we always have to be concentrating on Freya, Hayate, and Mirage as those whenever a combat breaks out. Anybody else, even Chuck and the rest of them and stuff, are just an inconvenience, and they're only there to be used to help out the character story for our three main characters whenever they need to. Otherwise, they just sort of disappear, and we know that they're supposed to be deployed with them, but we never see them.
Yeah.
Poor Chuck.
I think officially after this episode, Lorazabal has killed more people than Arid.
Once the show is over, I'm really going to miss your hate on for Arid. I'm really going to miss it. It's so sad.
All right, let's get back to the episode.
All right.
Let's get off the Arid show.
Well, I do want to mention one last thing about Arid in this early part of the episode, and it was something that made me really laugh. But there is one line of dialogue that I thought was funny, because Hayate is talking about Arid behind his back and calls him an old jellyfish muncher.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought was a brilliant line of dialogue.
That was so good.
I thought it was unexpected again, but very welcome. I thought it was incredibly amusing. So I just thought I'd point that out. It was fun.
And he did call him old in the I recognized Oyaji in the Japanese dialogue. So he did actually call him an old dude.
See, even Hayate agrees with me. He's not down with Arid extra dry.
Arid extra dry.
Yeah, and the next scene is probably a fan favorite where we see him walk here getting ready for they're not really getting ready for anything. They're just gearing up. But then the scene after that, Hayate saddles up to Mikumo, and they're kind of like talking in that one spot that I guess everybody goes to when they're not in the elevator. Oh yeah, and she asks him, "Why have you never like reacted to my voice and only Freya's?" There was some couple of exchanges, and she says something like she's afraid, so Hayate better take care of her or protect her. Hayate says something about her being 3 years old.
That was a weird scene.
That's a weird scene.
I'm not sure what they were trying to set up with that. I mean, we've had character interactions in the past where if you have two characters that aren't typically involved, like in their normal interactions, it leads to something later. Like Freya and Messer were not two characters that typically interacted. But after that interaction, it led to, it didn't lead to, but it was one of the things that kind of foreshadowed Messer's death. But that occurred, though, within like an episode of what happened. It was at the end of one episode, and then the very next episode, we lose Messer. So, but this one occurred in the middle, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe Mikumo and Hayate, like, something's going to happen later, where she says, like, well, I'm the youngest of the group, so you have to protect me. It was weird. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it yet, other than it was strange.
It seemed really flirty.
Not just flirty, but just kind of out of place.
Well, it seemed out of place because they had never flirted before. They had never even interacted
That's
before.
right. They rarely talk.
Well, I definitely got lots to say about this scene.
This is the scene you wanted to get to.
Go for it, Chad.
This scene is just so bizarre. I'm totally with Cecilia on this. I just don't understand like either the short term or the long term like results of setting up a scene like this because I just don't really get it. I don't know why these two characters are suddenly interacting. I don't know what they were establishing with this dialogue. And in the absence of any understanding of all that, it's just like I just look to any other explanation, and the explanation I keep coming back to, just the way the characters were animated and the way the dialogue was delivered, is it comes across as like very relationship-y, very like flirty, almost as if like there's these two people. You know what it's like? It's almost like a teen drama or a college drama or something like that, right? Where you have these two characters who are sort of in the same orbits of social circles amongst all their friends, but who have never had anything to really do with each other. And now it's like the last day of like, before graduation and everybody like leaves to go off to like bigger and better things. And here are these two characters regretting almost that they never really hooked up. That's what this scene feels like. There's this one point where Hayate mentions that Mikuma was only like 3 years old, you know, almost almost like an older
Man, I can't believe you're
I
only
can't believe you're only
three.
3 years old walking behind her, almost like an older guy trying to justify the fact that he's getting the hots for this really young underage girl, and it's so creepy. I just got such a like, yeah, weird vibe from these two, you know. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm so down on this episode, like from the start, but I'm not. It's just that there was a couple of these scenes that just didn't like they didn't entirely make sense because like well the Windermere thing I already covered that, but this one, yeah, I just don't know what's going on with this sequence at all. We got to get on to some more
Yeah,
positive
yeah.
stuff before this episode just becomes a big downer.
Yes, I promise
Speaking
there are
of,
things I actually
There's,
liked about
yeah,
this
there's good
episode.
stuff coming. There is good stuff coming that I really, really like.
yeah, the scene before, we were watching the Walkyr get dressed. They're putting on their special skin tight gear. And the one thing I noticed is that Freya uses Selsun blue. you know, that was like unexpected because, they have special hair. They should have like a special shampoo for the Windermerians, but maybe made of apples or
I did
something.
not
But
notice that. Which
you didn't
sequence
see
was
that?
this? The one where they were in the dressing room just before the
Yeah,
fan
yeah.
servicey part, yeah. Which was great, by the way. Actually, I actually like that sequence, even though it's like blatant fan service. It's also kind of cool. It had like at least the dialogue and the character interactions had some like dramatic gravitas to it, and the fact that they were gearing up. I mean, as crazy as and kind of silly and fan servicey as their gear is, it was kind of cool to see them like preparing for battle in their own way, kind of thing. And
Yeah, that was
I sent you a
cool.
picture.
and I did like the interactions between the characters. It felt like this scene did a good job of establishing that the Valkyrie girls are back together again after being separated and going through so many trials and tribulations that kind of tore them apart. Makumo being missing, Freya not being able to sing and stuff like that. And this felt like the moment where the girls were like, okay, it's us again. We're back. We're going to do our thing.
Yeah.
It's a good
Yeah.
moment.
And it was basically about Konami trying to figure out if these two girls that have been traumatized are ready for the upcoming battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, Mikumo with her downer line, like everyone's all like, "Yeah, I can do this," and they're talking about how Freya's this crazy brave girl for her first concert back from all of her testing and what happened with Hayate is another battle, and it's very playful and kind of warm-hearted, like warm fuzzies between the girls. And then when they're asking, like, what about you, Mikumo? And she's all like, I'm fine. I will continue to sing because that's what I've always done. Or maybe it's because I was programmed that way. And I'm like, thank you for ruining this moment, Mikumo. You just brought everybody in the room down.
Well, I mean, as usual, Mikumo's got to make it about herself, right? So, I mean,
Yeah. And how mysterious she
there's
is.
how mysterious she is. Yeah.
It's always about like,
Yep. Every time. Yeah. I mean, as much
Yeah,
as we've learned about her, we still don't know the whole picture. So Mikumo has to be there to remind us that we don't.
that's right. Just to remind us. But yeah, I liked it. I actually really liked seeing their tech, like how they put it on and seeing
Yeah.
it like up close. I thought that was really cool. I was totally grossed out by the sound it made, though.
These liquid sort of sheaths on parts of their bodies, which
Body condoms.
yeah, like body
Yes.
condoms. Yeah, it was very, very strange. I'm not really sure what that was or what it was doing. Maybe it was
All I
the
know is it
It's
made a gross noise. Like
yeah.
every time someone put on a piece of their suit, I was just squicked out. I just did not like that sound.
It's like nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah, it was just, oh, it was nasty.
Yeah.
But it gave me actually a better idea of like what it's made out of, though. Like, yes, it was a gross sound, but that gave me an idea of what that texture was. And then when who was it? Stubborn Nato and Sean Togakun, yeah, on Twitter, like about the cosplay for that. And I chose like a vinyl fabric because of the sound that it made. I'm like, oh, well, this thing is shiny and it's skin tight, so that would probably be what you would use if you were going to like make this actual suit. And I wouldn't be surprised if like someone attempted to make it like with our current tech and that's kind of a similar material. Sound was gross, but it gave an extra level of detail to the suits that I thought was pretty neat.
That would be so hot, though. Not hot in a good way, but just like in a convention, like
Oh, I
something
know.
like
You would
plastic.
die. You would die in that vinyl suit.
Yeah, with just no possibility to breathe or anything like that.
Nah.
Just before we move on from this scene, though, I do want to mention one last thing: is that we have the sequence where Chaos is sort of, I guess, gathering on the bridge, talking about like what they're going to do, and we do have another jellyfish metaphor, but it doesn't come from Arad.
Yes. I made note of that too.
Yeah.
It comes from Johnson. He says that the seagulls of the Ragnan seagulls and whatnot, if they don't respect the jellyfish or something, or don't pay attention to the jellyfish, they can get dragged off by them or something like that. And so yeah, I guess he was just making sure to let everybody know that they've got to be on their guard.
Be on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was seagulls who take jellyfish lightly are often dragged out to sea. And then he says, let's show the Windermerians what we've got. So, like,
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. Still cheesy, but it was pretty cool.
And then Mikumo makes a statement that, she's going to sing. It's like, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
'cause
you
that's
do.
your job.
Yeah.
You had one job. One job.
But you know what, though? This is finally, it's kind of feeling like older Delta episodes, though.
Yeah, I gotta say, like everybody's saying, like, "Oh, finally a great episode." It's not really like a great episode, but it's a good episode. We're back. We're back in the good. Hopefully, we're back on the good episodes. It's
Yeah,
only
it
been one.
feels like we've got a real show going on here again, and it's been quite a few episodes since that was the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really refreshing because it felt like the same kind of episode flow that we had like prior to episode 14. Where you've got your build up, you've got some goofy moments in there. Some parts are a little cheesy, but some parts are also kind of dramatic. And it was nice feeling like we were back in that flow. I don't know if for sure that the show is back in it, but for this episode, it felt like the same rhythm and the same flow, and I really liked it. It was familiar, and it was good.
Finally, we get into some action. Before that, though, somebody alerts Heinz that the planet Randall is getting attacked. Roy deploys Keith, Bogue, and Herman to fight whoever's at Randall, and then tells Cosum and the twins to stand by. On Randall, we see the BF-31A Kairos, and then we see the monster, which is piloted by Lorazabal.
Yeah.
Roy realizes something. Why are these guys here?
This whole sequence is very welcome again. After 3 very static episodes, it's nice to have at least a little action coming back. It was good to see at least some of the VF 171 Nightmare Pluses getting some good action in instead of just being blown to bits every episode. It's always nice to see the non-hero mecha designs in Macross get some moments to shine. Although I did like the appearance of the VB6 Koenig doing its thing, transforming into its massive monster mode and firing on a ship and leveling the ship all by itself, which was seriously cool. But it did actually look like we had seen a sequence like this before. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the animation parts of this sequence were lifted from a very similar sequence in Macross Frontier. We
Yeah.
had almost shot for shot in some respects. Like the editing was almost identical. So I think that this might actually be the same sequence, simply with the
Different
Koenig
mark.
monster reskinned.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if that's recycled footage.
Yeah,
If it's like a direct
I
recycled
think it
footage.
is. Yeah, I think it is absolutely because it's got all the same shots. It's got that one shot where he crash lands in
Yeah.
Gerwalk mode on the asteroid, and then it's got the follow-up shot where he raises the mecha and the two arms get like raised up and the cannons extend out, and
Ah,
the
yeah.
the platform comes down behind him and whatnot, and it's just yeah, and especially when he fires all four rail cannons and they shoot those three blasts or those four blasts that go far into the distance. That was originally a shot where Canaria in Macross Frontier used her cannons to create like a massive like reaction explosion that blew a bunch of the Vajra away in like sort of
Yeah.
one big volley. Here, that's changed up so that they become like almost anti-ship missiles. And they fire at like a Windermerian cruiser and blow it up. And it's very cool. Like I love the sequence, but I am almost positive that's the exact same animation from the Macross Frontier anime.
I can't remember who posted it, but I did see in one of the Facebook groups that someone did a side-by-side comparison, and it's definitely reused from Frontier and just reskinned.
Oh yeah.
But you know what?
Ah.
It was so badass that I almost didn't mind it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or
I
like I
don't
was
mind.
watching
Like, yeah,
it.
I don't mind at all, actually. I think it was,
Yeah.
if you got to recycle footage, this is the right way to recycle footage, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this
It was
looks
super
great.
cool.
Yeah. And it was also great that this was one of the first parts of the action sequence that were introduced to this episode, because it allows the action of Macross to come back in this episode after like so many episodes away with a big bang, and it just gets everybody like just amped up. So
Literally.
yeah, it was great. It was like, oh yeah, this is a level of combat and fierceness we've not seen yet, and this is awesome stuff. So I was very much on board for it.
Yeah. And I love the markings on the monster. It's not the same as the ones in Frontier, but
Yeah, because
you know.
it's one that's operated by the new UN Spacey, right? So it's got
Yeah.
their sort of markings on it. So it's actually quite different too, because it almost looks more like the traditional monster, to be honest. It's very, very green.
Yeah. The details on the eyes and the mouth are like not so detailed though. It's really different. It's just a couple of stripes. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
So Roy discovers that this is just a distraction on Randall, and the Delta Squad arrives on Alfheim, and Walkure takes their place on the horticulture structure where they're getting ready to sing. They have this new song. Did you get the title to it?
Yes, it actually is a new song. It's Absolute 5, and it'll be on Walkure Trap next month.
I don't know about that song. I think Freya sounded really bad on that.
Well, that's because she was singing bad on purpose. You jerk.
You think that's gonna be on the CD the way she sounded
That
on
would be
it?
so sad. That would be so sad.
So they're like telling Freya to sing. Come on, Freya, snap out of it. And then she got some help from Mikumo snapping out of it, Celia.
Yeah. Actually, I really liked this scene as a whole. I really like Freya's how she's hesitating when it comes to singing. Because Mirage said earlier about, how she got them approved to fly and to sing again so they could participate. She was saying, I'm fully responsible for you. And she even tells Hayate, when he's like, oh, well, I won't lose control again. That's not going to happen. And she's like, well, good, because I have to shoot you down if you do. Like, it's my responsibility. So Freya is hesitant because she's thinking about the consequences of her actions. And I really like that. Like, that's such a great character moment for her, even if it's not what she needs to be doing at that time. And then, everyone's saying, like, you've got to sing, and she's still afraid. And then Mikomo is like, that's enough. Remember your job. It is your job as a member of Walkure to sing and give it your all. Like, she slaps her and then continues singing and just throws up the Walkure hand sign. And Freya's like, oh, right. But I liked it overall as the character moment for Freya. And I liked this moment with the triangle also, because it was Mirage and Hayate who were supporting Freya together. And I really like that dynamic of them as friends. I don't know how I would feel now about a romantic dynamic between any of them, because
All three of them.
right, there we go. They're polyamorous. But yeah, I like the dynamic of them as three friends who are just trying to make it through this war together. And this was another nice moment of that.
Oh, maybe they're gonna remain friends, and then Hayate and Mikuma are gonna hook up. There you go. I can see that.
Oh no.
I'll ship that.
I'm sorry, I can't ship that.
Is it the age thing?
A little bit. It's a little creepy. I mean, she's 3 and he's 17.
I know it's weird. It's weird saying like, yeah, that's the hottest 3-year-old I've ever seen. Because
Well, you said it.
well, I don't think I've ever said that before, and meant it.
I meant it.
Amazing. Oh yeah, I can't follow up that.
There's a whole battle going on. Qasim and the twins survive.
Yeah, this whole sequence is pretty much awesome. This like everything is just working here. Again, one of the things that I've said way long time ago in our show, one of the things I like the most is when the combat is engaged and intertwined with character development, and it's also telling the overall story as well. That's sort of like the best parts of a really good action sequence. And I think this one is one of the better ones here of the series. Everything is working. The whole thing with Freya, sort of like having her crisis and whatnot, is just excellent character development. I agree with Cecilia on that. Yeah, I think it's nice to see Mirage and Hayate specifically working so well together in this episode, and Mirage also taking her leader role more seriously and watching out for Hayate, which is something that she says she's going to do or in one of the earlier scenes in this episode, and she follows through on it, which is great. We have that sequence where I guess Hayate is starting to really push himself, and he kind of has to because he's fighting Qasim, and Qasim is sort of giving him his all as well. He's doing the wind riding thing like Keith does. Everybody's kind of forced to meet the challenge, and Hayate is looks like he's having his moment where he's doing really well, but he's also like losing control, and Mirage has to sort of step in as well and remind him what he's doing, and also kind of has to save him as well. She has to come in and I think it was like Qasim uses his beam gun, and Mirage is sort of there to run in with her pinpoint barrier and protect him. And then Hayate sort of goes kind of nuts, but Mirage takes the initiative and just gets too close or something like that. She moves her Batroid into his and prevents him from using his weapons. And at that point, between Mirage and Freya, they sort of bring Hayate back from the edge, which is great. It's sort of like the team, that this is a chance for all three of our main characters to do their thing and to do it well. And it sort of reinvests us in this relationship to a certain extent. Not the love triangle, but just the teamwork. It allows us, the audience, to get reinvested in this trio yet again. And I think it's great. I think it works really well, and it just seems to flow like naturally. So I'm very much a fan of it.
Chuck, I guess they assigned him to guard the fold gate to Windermere, and he was kind of like successful taking out some guys, and then Walkure and Delta make it through the gate, except Qasim and Shao.
No, it's very sad for Qasim. But before I talk about that, actually, did you guys see the mini Itano circus that Chuck had? It was pretty cool too, because Chuck doesn't really get action sequences. And then
No.
when he got one, he got a really badass one. So I'm like, yeah, I really like Chuck. I wish he had more screen time and more character development.
You love Chuck.
I think he would be a fun character if they actually did something with him. You know, he's generally a good guy. He's usually like delivering comedic breaks in the show. He cooks. I mean,
I think that's the main one.
that's it. That's all he's good for is he cooks them food. And that's all they've used him for.
Freya and Kaname fall out of the shuttle, and the fight continues, and then it's not good for Qasim.
Qasim. When they're talking about the apples at the beginning, I'm like, well, yeah, because you're a farmer. And I'm like, but there's more to you than this. We already talked about it. But yeah, I actually thought that I thought that this was actually quite effective, even though it didn't have the same buildup that Messer had. Because Messer, when we lost Messer, we had a buildup of like, I think an episode and a half, maybe 2 episodes. And then the scenes prior to it. With Qasim, he actually was one of the knights that didn't get a ton of screen time until Roy made his plan to extend the war, and he didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
So he didn't have quite the same buildup that Messer did. But I also found his death quite sad. And I think it was because there was the added impact of Hayate trying to save him, where
Yeah.
he's like, what are you doing? You have to pull your plane up, like, stop, you're pushing yourself too hard. And when he didn't crash in the woods, like when he thought he was going to land in the trees, Hayate was relieved. He had that moment where he's like, oh, good, he's going to make it, and then Qasim didn't. Like, Qasim basically gave up anyways because he was covered in the icy crusties. He was going to die already, and I'm pretty sure that he knew that. So I think that's kind of what made his death more tragic. With Messer, we lost him because it was, oh, well, he has the VAR, and it kind of caught everyone by surprise. But with Qasim, it was more like this was inevitable, and he embraced it, and that's how he left the show. And that was quite sad. I think it was especially sad that he had a vision of his son before he died, but he didn't actually get to see his son before he died. He was choosing to stay home, to stay away from home until the war was over, so that his son wouldn't have to mourn a dead father. And his son still has to mourn a dead father. I'm just, it was really sad. Very effective. The parting
Yeah.
shot before it went to the credits, where it's like the camera zooming out on the Draken in the snow, was, wow. That was a powerful image.
Yeah, and then they switched to when the wind goes unnoticed instead of the regular song, which is the purity of destruction, right? And that
Yeah.
kind of like gave it more impact. But with that imagery of the kid and then his hand kind of like reaching out for the kid, I actually got like a little bit choked up on that scene. Plus, I like Qasim a lot more. I really like that character, and I wasn't looking forward to him dying. Not that I was looking forward to Messer dying or anything like that.
I just want to point out that your boy Arad there was actually the one responsible for disabling Sao.
For some reason, I missed it. Wasn't paying
You
attention
weren't paying
to Arad.
attention, yeah. And he did it all while he was carrying
Kaname.
yeah,
Kaname.
he's carrying Kaname in his mecha's hand, and he boom, there you go. So I guess your boy Arad isn't totally useless in combat, just mostly useless.
I for some reason I missed it. I don't know why. Maybe I ignored it on purpose.
I can't imagine, yeah. Can't imagine you having any bias against this character.
I must have looked away, ate a jellyfish or something, and then
Jellyfish.
looked up and the shot was going down. I was checking out this other review. Some guy that follows me on Twitter. His name is Mike Geek Life. He does like 5-minute reviews of the Delta episodes, and he actually brought up something really interesting where Cosm is going to crash and is headed towards the orchard. And Hayate mentions that, yeah, he'll probably live if he hits the orchard. Like the woods will probably slow down his descent or whatever. And Qasim chose not to destroy the trees, and he, crashed into the ground at a more deadly angle than he should have. That was like an interesting observation. So I didn't even think about that. I just thought he just wanted to die because he was all covered up by the what, the icy crusties
Nasty
all over the place.
crusties.
Yeah,
But that's what made it so sad, though, was when he realized that he was pulling up and then he let go.
he pushed
I'm
down.
like, oh, did he? I have to rewatch it now.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he intentionally pushed the stick down. So I think he wanted to avoid that forest, which is interesting. Like it's very Cosm, I guess, because he is sort of like preoccupied with that sort of nature and the trees and
Yeah.
Oh,
everything else. That is very much Cosm. So it's sort of like he gave his life in order to avoid damaging the trees of Windermere.
oh, there's in his introduction chapter in the Knights manga is chapter 4. Chapter 5 comes out on the 27th or something like that. It should be out now. I should probably see if it's up. In his introduction chapter, they actually talk about how during, I think it was 2051, I think is when it set in, something like that. I have to double check it. But at the time of the manga, when Keith is still pretty young, Nuns was destroying apple orchards because they were not being careful during their target practice. And Qasim actually like harasses somebody at the market. That's how they introduce him, because it was part of his family's orchard that was destroyed. So if they're actually going to keep some continuity with the manga, I could see him choosing not to hit the apple trees because he wouldn't want to do what they did, or destroying the livelihood of these people and what they work on. because that's what he was angry about when they introduced him in the manga, is that Nuns was just, shooting willy-nilly, and the people were suffering from it because their trees were getting destroyed. I totally just put that together right now.
Interesting.
That'd be really neat if they actually decided to connect with the supplementary material instead of using it like a crutch. Like that'd be neat if that was intentional.
I think it's cool. Yeah, that would be very good. Although I will say that I think that there's enough text in the show itself to justify Qasim's sort of like choice here. I think that it's long been established in the actual series that Qasim loves his orchards, his trees, and just like Windermerean nature in general. He's very protective of it. We've also been told that it's his passion too. If Windermere didn't need aerial knights and whatnot, that's what he would be doing, which is sort of what's made him a sympathetic character since the beginning, actually. Even though we don't get to spend that much time with him throughout the whole series, we do get repeated episodes where he is featured and we get to know more about him. And also, I think it helps at this point for us to feel sad about Qasim's demise because he has a relationship with Freya and Hayate. I mean, it's very like short. There's not much to it, but it was meaningful. They both appreciated what Qasim did for them on the planet, and the fact that Qasim let them both go, sort of like a very, very honorable sort of thing to do at the time. And so I think that sort of endears both Hayate and Freya to Qasim and also to the audience as well. We sort of get on board with Qasim, and even though he isn't that big of a character, there's enough there that we can actually, there's enough there that's been established about him and enough that we know him and we're familiar with him and might even have some sympathy for him and whatnot, that it makes his death sequence meaningful. It's definitely not meaningless, that's for sure. I found it actually had some gravitas to it.
I really like this episode as a whole. Of the 3 static episodes that we had, like I did enjoy the last one, and the other 2 were okay. But it was just really nice to kind of get back into the story pattern and the story rhythm that it had prior, and of course finally get an action sequence. But yeah, it was nice getting back into that, and I hope it stays that way. I'd like to see it continue for the remaining 4 episodes.
Yeah, I was very pleased with this episode as well. It was just lots of fun, lots of really good animation in this episode too.
Yeah.
The mecha animation in this episode was really, really great. They had a lot of shots of the Macross Elysian, and yeah, it was very, very cool. There was that sequence where they had the Macross Elysian appear out of fold space, and it sort of transforms as soon as it comes out of fold space and fires all its guns.
Yeah.
And that one.
But just that looked really damned cool. There's lots of like brief but excellent sequences like that, and like all the combat sequences too were very well done with the VF-31s and the Drakens and everything else. It was all looking really, really good.
I'm looking at comments and trying to decide which of these we should go with. Okay. Let's see. So this one from Vaseline 1996, I'm going to kind of summarize and paraphrase a little bit because it's quite long. Was talking about how Mikomo in the big reveal, or at least the reveal, about what she is towards the end of episode 21. This user says that this Mikomo is not the one that we are used to having in the show. And what they're saying is that, to back this up, is that Mikomo doesn't really believe the information that Lady M has herself, but when she's delivering the information that Lady M has told her about what she is, she's just stating the facts, and it almost is like a moment where she's dehumanized because she's isolated further from the group, where she's just a tool instead of a member of Walkure. And even when she's saying it, she's saying it without passion and without her usual spark. And that's an interesting point. I didn't think about that, because even in this episode, Mikomo kind of does that before she, gathers her confidence and says, I'm here, let's go do this. When she's in the dressing room with everybody, she's like, well, I'll continue to sing, because that's what I'm programmed to do. And that's an interesting point. I didn't think about that before, about how the way Mikomo delivered her information and the way HQ divulged that information about her kind of distances her even further from the group and takes away a little bit of her human element. And if you think about it, she didn't have that much of it to begin with, because she's not a very well-developed character.
Yeah.
Well, she's pretty developed for a 3-year-old.
God.
All right, so Ghost Bear 177. We didn't actually find out what Mikumo is. We found out she's a clone, but not what she's a clone of. I'm totally with you on her being protoculture. I don't think Burger is mind controlling Royd. That was the first thing that jumped to mind, though, until the mural showed up. I do think Burger is going to be the big bad. I think Royd is going to be a misguided idealist at worst. The killing the king thing was just to make us think the worst. Yeah, we discussed this in length though, last week, wasn't it? About him killing the king and how it wasn't received as bad enough by Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thrown off because they didn't really follow up on what happened last week at the end of the episode.
Well, and the reality is too with that whole thing with Keith is that it was just kind of weird anyways, because it's like I killed your father and Keith didn't respond, but he gave Heinz the icy crusties and he's ready to kill Royd. So I don't know about that response.
Keith could have been Inigo Montoya. He could have been like, "You killed my father.
Prepare
Prepare
to
to die."
die.
I would have even appreciated that. But his response when his best friend from his childhood tells him, yeah, I killed your dad," and then he's like, "Whatever." I'm like, all right, clearly you don't care here.
I can't call him dad, so he's not really my dad.
That's true. I mean, this episode did tell us that he wasn't allowed to call him father anymore, so maybe that's why he didn't respond. He's probably like, "Good, I'm glad that bastard's dead," or something like that.
Let me see. I'm trying to read what this the final thing that Bahoma wrote. I don't know if surprising is the right word. It feels like an amateur move from the writers. Sometimes when writing side characters, it's easy to get sidetracked on one and spend too much time developing them. In doing so, it can leave the main characters underdeveloped. Poor Mirage has really suffered heavily from this. It feels like we're only just starting to get to know her and we're already at the last few episodes in the series. I feel like Delta needs more than one season just so the character stories can be fleshed out and concluded fully. Maybe do what SDF did, have some extra episodes showing events after the final battle of the war. We have 4 episodes. Find out if they could tie it up neatly. Yeah, I actually wrote back to him. I said, it's surprising that a character like Kaname, who was largely ignored in the beginning, is probably the most rounded. Kaname has a backstory. It's almost like complete. We know what planet she's from. We know what she used to do. We know how her childhood was, how horrible it was because it was like a war-torn planet. And we know that she used to sing before she joined Walkure. And we know a bit about her love life. So, and she's like turns out to be like a badass, right? Because she was in those battles in her planet.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know if Mirage is as underdeveloped as like everyone may think she is. I read a blog post today actually from Carice 67 on Twitter
Yeah, I read that.
about why she likes Mirage, and I actually really liked what she was talking about, where she's saying that Mirage is just normal. She's not an ace pilot like her family lineage, and she doesn't have anything that really like stands out about her in the way that other protagonists have. Like Malin stood out because she was a child of the geniuses. Cheryl stood out because she's Cheryl. She had that feeling to her. That was who Cheryl was. And I like that idea that Mirage is just a normal person, and that's what makes her special is her drive and her determination to follow through on what she commits to, even if she may not necessarily have the talent or all of the skill to get there. And I like that idea. I just wish we had some more time to explore it on the show itself. I don't feel like she's had a lot of screen time to really explore that. But in this episode, that definitely demonstrates it, where she says, "I'll protect both of you." Even though Mirage is not the ace pilot that Messer was, she is committed and determined to follow through on taking responsibility for Hayate and Freya. And that's where she's taking that
Yeah.
leadership role, and really making it her own and following through on it. I just wish we got to see more of that.
Yeah, more of my favorite episode with her is actually the birthday episode where she goes shopping with Hayate, and we get to know a bit about her because she's just talking about regular stuff, not about the battles or flying or anything like that. And yeah, I wish there was more of those type of scenes with her. Yeah, I really like the character also, but there's just not enough of her in this show. We need the Mirage show.
Yeah. As for additional episodes, I don't know if I want more Delta. I would really have to see how the finale plays out. I think this may be just enough.
I don't want anything tacked on. If it's more episode, it would have to be something that they decided on earlier, I guess.
Yeah, I
I could
agree.
use some more Delta.
Yeah, I don't know yet if I want more. If more means we get some deeper character development and we get some nice story movement, then yes, by all means. But if more means we get like more episodes of episodes 19 and 20, then maybe I don't really want that. I'm not so sure. I'd have to wait and see how the final episode plays out.
They could give us more economy. They could give us more Mirage in the movies. That'll be fine,
The movies.
right? Delta creators, just Mirage it up.
劇場版 Macross Delta. Movie edition. There we go.
There you go. Celia Rose, where can we find you when you're not on the Macross Delta recap show?
I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Celia Rose Cosplay. And I'm also on Twitter at Planets Twinkle.
And Chad, where are you at in your social network sphere?
You can always visit my website, the Macross Mecha Manual, or you can send me an email at marchingcw@hotmail.com. You can also visit the official Facebook page for the Macross Mecha Manual, which is facebook.com/Macross Mecha Manual. And lastly, I post at various anime message boards such as ANN, Anime Nation, and the Macross World forums.
And this is EXO. You can find me on the Macross World Facebook page or the Macross Delta Facebook page. Or you could tweet at me on Macross Tweet, the official Macross World Twitter account. Let me know. Pro-Arid, anti-Arid. I think everybody talks to me through Twitter. So yeah, tweet at me. And that's it. See you next week for episode 23, Scarred Requiem.